to the launch of the Winter Spring 2022 issue of TSR. That's my dog in the background, sorry. I gave him a braided bully stick, but ooh, oh well. So here's the front cover, Scott Connery. It's called Mirror. And here's the back cover, Peter Aaron's photography. And you'll be hearing from Peter a little later this evening. We're thrilled that you're here. Paul Harding has done a bang up crackerjack job setting up the Writers Speak Wednesday series. So you'll be able to see those on our YouTube channel. But it's important to thank people. Bob Reeves is our publisher. Carla Cagliotti is our associate publisher, and they just make everything happen. Frank Imperial makes all this happen, woohoo, and a lot more. Believe me, whenever we have technical difficulties, he's our wizard. Peggy Gronis has just been wonderful in arranging so much with TSR, the Southampton Review. This is our 15th year, so we're pretty excited about that celebration. Anita Cusick is our art director, and gosh, does she work miracles over and over again. But I want to tell you a little bit about our editors. So Michelle Whitaker is our extraordinary poetry editor. If you ever get a chance, look up her poetry, you will be astonished. So full of grace and intelligence. Vanessa Cutie is an associate editor of ours, an incredible short story writer who's just won so many accolades. And now I have a surprise because Amy Hempel has just agreed to come as our fiction editor. Amy?
Thanks, Luann. I'm very excited about this return, and I'm thrilled to get to work with you closely again, and so many exciting new voices. So very happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, several of the pieces that you will be hearing tonight are because Amy brought them in already. She was already working assiduously, just exploring new voices and bringing in people and established voices as well. So you'll be hearing those this evening. And so now, so that I don't hold on to you too long, and the braided bully stick ran out, so I got to go figure out how to make the dog happy for a second. But boy, do we have great stuff for you this evening. And Bobby Crace, who has a piece coming out in the May issue, we'll have another event then. Bobby will be your MC this evening. So welcome and thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, Luann. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, all of you, for sharing tonight, and those joining in to here's some great art. This is launching a great journal. Holds a special place in my heart. A few years ago, when I went to an open house for Stony Brook, deciding where I wanted to get my MFA, I went to Stony Brook. I was like, I'm not going to go to a school in Long Island. What's this about? And I went to the open house. It was great. And then it was followed by a TSR launch. And I was blown away by the readers and the writing community. I wound up drinking wine and chatting with everybody the whole night and was left knowing I was going to go to Stony Brook. So it's great to be here emceeing this event with some great writers, sharing some incredible work so we can all connect to that creative energy. Great. Let's get to it. The first reader we have tonight is Blessing J. Christopher, who is a Nigerian writer with an MFA in fiction, candidate at Virginia Tech. Her stories and essays have appeared in Guernica, The Rumpus, Salt Hill, X-Ray, and JMWW. She is currently working on her first novel. So with that, you have Blessing.
Hi, everyone. So I'll be reading my short story, Some Husbands Have No Grave, which just appeared in the latest issue of the magazine. So I'm going to start right now. Children were free to piss and spit on the grave as they played. Teenagers snuck out of their houses most nights and discovered passion on the rectangle of earth. The cheap headstone, bleached white by decades of rain and history, no longer carried a name. The patchy epigraph made stutterers of people who cared enough to read. It said, in loving memory of a father, brother, friend. Strangers wouldn't have known this from reading the broken words, but the dead man was also a husband, but someone had thought to free him from this wretched designation in death. Once upon a time, the grave was a fresh mound of earth, sweetened by the smell of roses around its perimeter. Then it became bald, trampled barren by uncaring feet. Someone's rug or laundry was always sunning on the chipped remains of the block, Everyone knew that the grave didn't hold any remains, and so they disrespected it to their heart's content. Termites never got to feast on the body because the man never returned from one of his many wars. 5 years after he failed to reappear, the missing man's neighbors dug a hole behind his house, filled it with their tears, altering him from missing to dead. They ignored his wife, who insisted that her husband was alive and well. People feared the wife as much as they hated her. She was something so terrible that people had to whisper about her in the safety of their rooms. Choose a wife like you're going to war a day after the wedding. This rule applies even in peacetime. The dead man certainly didn't have the luxury of choosing the woman. When he was a young man of around 19, he left home to fight for a stretch of land his ancestors had owned for millennia. In life, his name was Samson. Samson and other men waded through murk to defend what was theirs, wielding axes, Dane guns, and clubs. Samson and the other men tied charms around their waist, which made the sharp blades of axes bounce off their skulls without felling them. Bullets rolled off their bodies without breaking skin. From afar, people saw men rolling in the wetland, wearing the brown mud-like skin, only their irate eyes visible as they fought. At night, the fighters slept between the weeds growing in patches around the swamp. They were fighting because in '56, the government had discovered crude oil in Oloibiri. This discovery was going to change Oloibiri's fortunes, people believed. The oil would bring better roads, 2, good schools, 3, well-equipped hospitals, 4, pipe-borne water, and 5, lots and lots of good things. Envious of Oloibiri's good fortune, people in other towns and villages praised their ears to the ground, hoping to hear the gurgle of crude beneath the earth. The people in Samson's town suspected the presence of oil, but another community claimed the wetland as theirs. The clash was inevitable. Like his biblical namesake, Samson fought too bravely. He charged towards oncoming bullets from smoldering guns. He rushed into the path of swung machetes, unafraid of the hewing that usually followed such callousness. Samson, who didn't know how to swim, dove underwater and held his enemies down. He fought in the heat and the rain. The charms began to fail as the clash continued. By the 24th month, tired men lunged at each other feebly, like their muscles were overcooked noodles, intoxicated by the stink wafting from the decomposing corpses of their comrades. Samson's brother, who was at home, was shocked to hear of Samson's stupidity and bravery. The brother sent word to the battleground. Samson was to try and come home alive because the family had found him a wife. Samson was one of the few who returned from the front. This was possible because he now had something to look forward to, a woman. He limped home the day the government stepped into the middle of the drawn-out clash, promising to settle the dispute. This stepping in was necessary since the battle had already started leaking from the bounds of the wetland. Children were missing on their way home from school, and people in both towns were getting hacked in their sleep. Samson's new wife hugged him at the door and led him to the bathroom. She handled his body as though it were a fragile egg. She peeled cake mud from his skin with the blunt end of a kitchen knife, washed up the oil on him with hot water. In the hospital, while receiving treatment for his injuries, Samson learned her name. She called herself Maria. In peacetime, pick a wife like you're leaving for war. This means climbing her family tree and inspecting every branch for signs of rot. Questions to ask a girl's family tree. What kind of illnesses flow through this bloodline? Have people here faced public disgrace for stealing? Do children live to adulthood? How many male children did her mother birth? Are her sisters promiscuous? As previously mentioned, Samson didn't investigate since you never look a gift horse in the mouth. He was also too sick to check. Samson snapped awake in the hospital, crazed and feverish, to see a blurry woman smiling down at him. Her skin was darker than the night, and when he heard her name was Maria, he thought he was the mother of God sent down to mend his broken soul. His flaky lips cried for her, muttering the word mother, over and over as the fever shook him. She was there for him, the softness of her palm stroking healing into his skin. Thank you.
Thank you, Blessing. That was fantastic. Great. Next, we have McKenzie Watterson. McKenzie is a Montana-born writer and educator. As an MFA candidate at Stony Brook University, she taught in the undergraduate creative writing program. She also teaches writing and literature to incarcerated teens through the nonprofit Free Verse Writing Project. I've had the fortune of having class with McKenzie, so I'm really looking forward to her writing. McKenzie, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby. Always wonderful to have an introduction from you. Today, I'll be reading from my essay that's appearing in TSR, titled Running Through Us. I'll be grabbing a bit from the middle, so all you need to know is this is an essay about Alzheimer's in my family. My grandfather had the disease and how it affects our family. So I'll dive in. I know music melted my grandfather back into the person he was. A piano, a record player, a cheap Bluetooth speaker, anything that could play the oldies. If there was music playing, he was dancing. I would roll his wheelchair out onto the dance floor. Alzheimer's stole his balance, and offer my hands. Always the polite lead, he softly wrapped my fingers in his and bounced them to the beat, lifting for me to spin. I obliged, bending to fit under his arm, skirting wheelchair footrests, twirling for him until the music stopped or a nurse cut in. Papa was a popular dance partner. At one cousin's wedding, I danced on my dad's shoes, and at another cousin's wedding, my dad and I cleared the dance floor, the best two-steppers in the room. Lately, my dad has been making this joke. Anytime he forgets something, he shrugs. Well, I guess it's time. We all laugh and tell him he's sharp, that he's still got it, and he does. But I feel the fear in that joke. Maybe it's because his brother is getting worse, forgetting things he shouldn't, slipping away from the happy uncle I knew. My dad read there's a 1 in 3 chance of developing Alzheimer's if a parent has it. Susan, Larry, and my father, David, 3 children. If Larry has it, then that's 1 in 3, and perhaps my dad is safe. But the genetics are more complicated than that, and I can tell he just doesn't trust those odds. I don't either. One time, my father raced me across the yard, his steps 3 times mine, and showed me the muscle in his calf. You'll have strong legs like this someday. One time, he fished the Bighorn River with a fly I tied just for him, bright purple with sparkling thread. One time, we fought about politics, and he told me he loved me and hoped I'd never run for office because I would win, and even though he knows I've done my reading, he just doesn't agree with me. One time, he held me when a crush broke my heart. One time he auditioned for a play with me and we drove to practice every night and I laughed at his detective costume and Mom brought us flowers. I do not want him to lose our memories. I do not want him to lose me. He was born with genes and risk factors waiting. I do not know if or when Alzheimer's might start stealing his mind. I share my father's face, his laugh, his cadence, and his genes. Alzheimer's may well be in my future. I live in my mind, in stories, in words and ideas. It's my career, a writer, a teacher. Who will I be if I lose the sharpness that defines me? Who am I if the disease that will take it all away is already coded in every cell of my body? Thank you.
Fantastic, McKenzie. Thank you. Next, we have some photography from Peter Aaron. Now, Peter Aaron, who began his career as a cinematographer, found himself drawn to still photography and has been shooting architecture and interiors ever since, including as a contributing photographer to Architectural Digest. His mission is to provide a platonic ideal of each structure, showing the building as the architect originally envisioned it. He aims for a complexity of composition with several views within each larger picture. So with that, Peter.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Bobby. I'd just like to say that I'm a commercial photographer who happened to stumble upon a situation that was anything but commercial, that my family, particularly my wife, Brooke Allen, decided that we should go to Syria at a time when things were very quiet there, but that Americans were afraid of the Middle East in general. So we all went. That would be the twin girls who were 16, my wife and myself. And all I can say is it was the most wonderful, wonderful place to visit. People were so warm and welcoming. And on top of all of this, I brought an infrared camera, which I had never used before. I had taken one of my commercial Canon cameras and had it converted in the US to an infrared camera that could only see black and white in the infrared spectrum. And I thought this would be ideal, a great place to try it out because it responds well to ruins and to landscape. So I had a blissful 3 weeks traveling through Syria with the family. We got to see Damascus, Aleppo, Palmyra, and a number of other places. And the thing that I remember most from the trip was a young man who was a graduate student in Damascus who took an interest in us. And while he was talking, he said, you know, if there were ever a civil war in this country, this is in 2009, by the way, it would be a complete apocalypse. It would be a war without end. And we thought that was very theoretical, but we found out that 2 years later, that's exactly what happened. I don't know what became of him, but it couldn't have been a picnic, that's for sure. Anyway, the photographs, I thought, were a perfect way to express the architecture of the ancients there, because the infrared brings out the texture of the stone and changes the tones of things. As a matter of fact, the garments, the chadras and other clothing, if they're cotton, they turned out white in the pictures. And if they were polyester, they turned out black. So when you look at these pictures, you see a pretty high contrast in people's clothing. Anyway, I really miss the Syrians, and it's a much more three-dimensional and interesting place than what you get from reading the news. And I hope you enjoy the pictures in the magazine. Here are some of the pictures. While I was talking, I might have missed a few. That's Damascus. That's a beautiful, beautiful mosque inside the citadel at Aleppo. And the trees, the shape of the trees, and then that man standing in the doorway who you can hardly see, the things that infrared helped to accentuate. This is extraordinary. The tetrapylon in Palmyra, after ISIS came through, it's a monopylon. Only the one in the foreground is still standing. They just blew up everything. And this was the central park to the people that lived there every weekend. And this was a weekend people came out and picnicked there. And it was just a beautiful place to take your family and have a picnic. This is a caravanserai. It's a place to tie up your camel on the Silk Road. It's in Damascus, and the people would stay upstairs. The camels would be in that room, and the goods would be traded. It's attached to the souk. It's quite a beautiful structure. That's there's a place called Malula, and it's a unique place in that they still speak Amharic there. The kids come up to you and they talk to you in Amharic just to show you that they can. But basically, that was the language of Jesus, and they speak Arabic and Amharic. Not everyone lives in a cave, but that was the most picturesque dwelling that I came across. There's the mosque in Damascus, which got destroyed. The tower came down. It had a mosaic on the opposite wall that was one of the biggest mosaics in the world. It was the entire wall of the mosque. It was just a beautiful place. A monastery in Malula, built right into the rock. So the Christians and the other Arabic sects were all living together. This is, well, the biggest castle in the world is called Crac de Chevalier. It could hold 5,000 knights and horses, and it was hovering above this town here. It was an extraordinary place to walk through the corridors and see how much space there was inside this stone fortress that was the highest point anywhere around.
Great. Well, Peter, I think that's the photos we have. They're powerful images. Thank you for sharing with us and with the journal.
Oh, great. Great.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Next, we have Mary Mannion, another former classmate of mine, so I'm looking forward to hearing her art again. Mary Mannion holds an MFA degree in creative writing from Stony Brook University, Manhattan. Now a digital short form writer at J.P. Morgan Chase, she graduated from Swarthmore College with a BA in Honors English Literature. Car Ride Down, an excerpt from her thesis novel, Unimportant Things, is Mannion's first publication. All right, Mary.
Thanks, Bobby. It's definitely super exciting to be back here, and I really miss everybody in the program. So I'm just going to read just a short excerpt from the excerpt that is published. And just for some context, the narrator is this freshman in high school, and she has a best friend named Sophia, and they are currently on a car ride down to an upperclassman's house. And there are 3 upperclassmen, and one is passing around a bottle of liquor, and the narrator is like deciding basically if she should take a drink from it. And Sophia is her best friend. I suppose that Sophia found it important to pretend that she knew what she was doing. I couldn't blame her exactly. To imagine that Alex, Van, and Javier might think we were lame or unfit to hang out with them, well, to avoid that was surely worth lying. Still, it was odd to hear Sophia going out of her way to impress anyone. In all the years I had known Sophia, I'd never witnessed her in a situation where she wasn't confident being exactly who she was. Then again, I realized it was possible she wasn't lying about having drunk liquor before. Perhaps there were parts of Sophia in which she had used discretion to keep hidden from me. "Do you want some, Eliza?" Van asked, as Sophia lowered the bottle from her mouth. It was a glittering October night, and I was on the way to Alex Green's beach house with Van. Prospects for the future seemed to take on a new, electrifying quality. I could be a celebrity, maybe, like Patty Boyd in Beatles paparazzi shots, holding George's arm, strolling through the streets of London, or, later on, in the backseat of a limo wearing a white dress and gripping yellow flowers after her marriage vows with Eric Clapton. That Patty had been the inspiration not only for the classic love song Something, but also for Clapton's first dance wedding reception hit, Wonderful Tonight, was beyond remarkable. It was an extraterrestrial feat, godlike and elusive, beyond the grasp of human language to describe. In the back of Javier's car, speeding toward Alex's beach house, I could be a version of myself that was better than who I really was. I could pretend to be some ultra-fashionable, desirable rock muse who wore winged periwinkle eyeliner and acted as if that wasn't unusual, and who gazed in the direction of cameras almost exclusively without smiling. Maybe before we got all the way to the beach, I would ask Alex to pull quickly into a drugstore parking lot so that I could jump out and buy over-the-counter blonde hair dye. Then we could all guzzle down the rest of the mixed drink that Javier had brought along. And once we got to Alex's house, we could dye my hair in her kitchen sink and watch the excess colors swirl down the drain. Then Alex or Sophia could cut bangs across my forehead, and Van or Javier could snap pictures to document the occasion. That way, with my new hairstyle, I would fit the part fully, and I would have evidence that Alex, Van, and Javier had a vested interest in changing me into someone who belonged with them, who was a natural fit to be one of their best friends. I could ask whoever took the pictures to forward them to my cell phone, and from there I could forward them to my email, and then print them out from the desktop in the computer room at home and tape them into my diary. Even though the flip phone pictures wouldn't be great quality, I would keep safe, careful track of them forever. And then by the time I became a parent to teenagers who had decided that I sucked, I could show them the sort of wild, spontaneous teenager I had been. And tomorrow, by the time my hair had fully dried and was a muted, dainty blonde, I would leave it a little messy without brushing it and tuck an oversized, freshly picked sunflower behind my ear, and Van and I would stand alone in Alex's front yard, and I would be wearing wide-leg jeans and a rainbow-striped sweater tank top, and Van would grab both my hands in his own and look me in the eye and say, "You look wonderful. I never thought I'd really meet you, but now here you are and you're mine." That was the life on the other side of taking a drink from the bottle that everyone else was passing around. "Yeah, I'll have some," I said, and the bitter taste entered my mouth, and I didn't cough or gag. I just swallowed it. Thank you.
That was great, Mary. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Karen Shepard. So, Karen is a Chinese American born and raised in New York City. She's the author of 4 novels, including most recently The Celestials and one story collection, Kiss Me Someone. She teaches at Williams College. So with that, we have Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very cool to be here and hearing everybody, and, yay, small literary magazines. Let's go. I'm very excited to be part of it. I'm just going to read a chopped up version of the first couple of pages from the story that's in the issue. It's called News from the Adult World. The post went out on the town's Mother Hen Info and Issues Facebook group at 8:35 on the last Sunday in January. Missing child alert. My daughter Maya went for a short bike ride at 3 p.m. and has not been heard from since. She was wearing a black winter coat and a burgundy bike helmet, carrying a snowflake patterned backpack and riding her purple bike. If you have seen or heard anything, please be in touch. Christine Liu did not use Facebook very often, but she did not have to tell this small New England community, despite the fact that she and her daughter had only been members of the community for less than 6 months, that Maya was African American and that she was in 6th grade and an erratic child whose mix of sobriety and recklessness was pronounced. Who among the other parents at the one elementary school in this college town could forget last fall's field trip when Evan Price's biologist father had pointed out the underground bee's nest and Maya had immediately stomped on it with her sandaled foot? Or the time a month later when she had ridden her bike to the neighboring town 10 miles north across state lines on a busy 2-lane road and then ridden it back? Maya would have told anyone who'd asked that she preferred to do things like that, identify a fear, and then walk right into it to see what would happen. And no one thought of either mother or daughter without recalling the accusations of racism that Christine had leveled against 2 of the town's longest serving police officers less than a month after her arrival. This would neither have surprised nor displeased Christine, given how strongly she believed in both the obstacles she was up against and the fierceness with which she was capable of meeting them. There was much the town didn't know about the history of the new residents, but what it did suggested a complicated and difficult life for which everyone agreed there was much sympathy. Since her divorce, Christine and Maya had been living in hotels or depending on the generosity of friends, but things had been getting too hard in the city, especially for a woman, she'd said quietly one night to Tara Finch, the only other single mother she'd met in town. Tara had found the sadness in Christine's eyes uncomfortable. Too much sharing, too soon, she'd thought. So she'd rolled her eyes and said, "Don't get me started." And then she'd stood, pretending that she wanted a glass of water. If she had responded differently, Christine might have gone on, telling her that things had happened that had made both her and Maya afraid. She might have also confided in her about Maya's migraines and rashes, her fear of loud noises, the unbelievable way both of them had been treated by Maya's school the previous year. She might have added what they continually told each other: "It's us against the world." Thank you. I think I'll stop there.
That was great, Karen. That was
Thank you.
great. All right. Fantastic. Next, we have Nathaniel Koster. Now, Nathaniel is a poet, nonfiction writer, and lyricist originally from Roosevelt, New Jersey. He holds an MFA in poetry from the University of New Orleans and lives in Mexico City with his fiancée and mini chihuahua, where he works as a freelance writer, editor, and writing mentor. His most recent album, Float Tank by Nate Lost, is available on all music streaming platforms. So, Nathaniel, thanks. Take it away.
Hi, thank you. And thanks for all the readers before me. It's just an honor to be part of this magazine. I haven't had the chance to see it yet because I'm in Mexico City, but I'm really looking forward to holding the physical magazine. I'm just gonna read a short poem. It's called Swimming in the Bayou. Swimming in the Bayou. Today I watched a man jump into the city bayou and swim. He did the breaststroke towards the main, then flipped over on his back and floated, occasionally swinging a lazy arm to propel himself in the direction of the horizon. His eyes were on the sky when two kayakers glided by. He was just a head haloed by ringlets of dark water. He looked like a turtle or a pancake floating in a pleasant filth, or maybe just a man trying to forget, giving in, giving up suffering, even for just a moment as he sifted through the city like fog. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathaniel. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes.
Next, we have some memoir writing from Larissa Ursha. Now, Larissa is a practicing lawyer. She's also an MFA candidate at Stony Brook, Southampton, a short story writer. She was awarded the Deborah Hecht Memorial Prize for Fiction for Exceptional Promise. So with that, we have Larissa.
Thank you. Okay, so this was actually something that happened because of a prompt in Luann's class about the worst first date that you've ever been on. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs, and we'll talk about it. New York Avenue. As I caught the gyrating pole dancer's sweaty towel with my face, I suspect she winked at me out of pity. What terrible thing had I done to deserve this? Matt and I got along like a house on fire. We'd met when a mutual friend, Avery, decided on a whim to rent a cabin in the Catskills for a long weekend with friends. Avery was a close friend of my law school buddy, Rachel. Matt arrived with his friends, Johnny, Eric, and James, in a beater VW with packs of beer. The whole group vibe was relaxed. We took long morning hikes, then gathered wood for the fire. We roasted marshmallows on sticks on the outdoor fire pit. We talked endlessly about nothing. In the evenings, Cece brought out the games: Operation, Clue, Monopoly, Jenga, and some massive jigsaw puzzles. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. Monopoly games took center stage. Everyone was out to win it. Callie grabbed the cannon, Avery went for the battleship, Matt went for the top hat, Johnny was the iron, Rachel took the lantern, Cece grabbed the rocking horse, James drove, so he got the car. I ended up with the boot. Matt also doubled as banker. Matt, Avery, and Rachel quickly became Monopoly land barons. Johnny and James kept goofing around. Johnny was dead certain that the iron piece was a jinx. Cece and I held our own. I blamed my lackluster performance on landing in jail a few times. Callie was losing. It was bad. Matt, can the bank give me some money? Callie whined. You want a loan? No, Matt, can't you just give me the money? Callie fluttered her lashes while she giggled, flipping her hair to the side. She crossed, then uncrossed her legs. Matt shook his head no without a further glance. Come on, Callie pleaded. If the bank can't give me money, can't you just give me some of your money? She stroked his arm, teasing. She tilted her head to the side and smiled at him. Her eyes widened. He brushed off her hand. It's just your luck. Don't be a sore loser. Somebody's got to lose. You'll just have to deal with it. Callie glared at him briefly, her eyes wet, until Cece tapped her elbow, sliding over 500 Monopoly bucks her way. Matt, don't be a dick, Avery wearily replied as she pocketed more rent. Matt shrugged. He fanned himself with his Monopoly largesse. Callie sulked and stared at the board. After watching the game for a few minutes, she left the room only to return and replace Matt's empty, warmed-over beer glass with a cold, frosted pale ale. When my turn came, everybody wanted to know, are you going to buy New York Avenue? On Sunday evening, Callie ended up drunk crying during a remarkably uneventful Monopoly game. Sometimes when Callie did not get her way, she threw fits. I figured that she must have been upset that she was losing the game again. Rachel, Cece, Avery, and I followed Callie to comfort her, but only Avery was allowed into the room and shooed us all away. Callie shot me a nasty parting look. Eventually things calmed down. Everyone but Matt and I turned in for the night. We ended up chatting until sunup. He'd recently graduated from Fuqua, Duke's big deal business school. He was a long distance runner in college and kept to grueling early morning fitness regime. He was fit, tanned, and from California. James had invited Matt to round up the number of guys for the weekend. Right before we climbed back into our cars, Matt asked me for my number. The gods had finally smiled upon me. I never had luck meeting guys, either in real life or over the internet. With Matt asking me out on a date, I thought, hey, maybe my luck is changing. We made plans to meet up the following week, Thursday night.
That's great. Great story. Thank you, Larissa. Appreciate it. All right. Next, we have some fiction from Liam Edward Talty-Johnson. Now, Liam is a writer from Toledo, Ohio. Their work has previously appeared in The Forge, Havik, and the Molotov Cocktail. Talty-Johnson is currently based in Gainesville, Florida, where they are an MFA candidate in fiction at the University of Florida. Liam, how about it?
Thank you for having me. Thanks for believing in my work, everyone who's ever believed in my work. This is a story called Make Believe. My little brother was taken from the jungle gym at Swan River City Park when I was 9 and he was 5. There used to be swans in the river a long time ago when the city was first founded, but the colonists ate them all. In the summer sun, my little brother's bowl cut shone like the gold-plated mirror of a low Earth orbit telescope. He wore a t-shirt with blue and white horizontal stripes and an applique shaped like a ship's wheel on the pocket. I had a fruit punch mustache and my shorts were all stretched out. The lady who took him was dressed all in purple. She wore purple patent leather flats, purple harem pants, a boxy purple polyester top, and a big old floppy purple hat. Even her sunglasses had purple frames and purple lenses. She snapped him up with her bony arms at the bottom of the spiral slide. He said, "Oh," and the purple lady took off with him into the bushes behind the picnic shelter. My little brother disappeared somewhere off the coast of Majorca in the last few weeks of 1999. We had gone there over Christmas so my father could do business and to wait out Y2K, just in case. We were walking on the sand and I started to chase after him with a sleeve of sobrasada wrapped in parchment paper. He hated the smell of sausages, so he ran as fast as he could, faster than me. He scrambled deftly over a rocky outcropping. I had to take my time. The straps of my sandals kept coming undone and my cowrie shell bracelet slipped off my wrist. When I made it over the jagged limestone, he was already shoving the shabby outrigger into the sea. His swim trunks had parrots and toucans all over them, going every which way. I ran to the edge of the shore. He flopped into the boat on his belly. He drifted out with the tide, rising and falling with the waves. I yelled for him to swim back. He stuck his tongue out and flapped his arms at me as he disappeared over the curve of the earth. My little brother was abducted by a handsome man in the back half of a two-person horse costume outside the airbrush t-shirt shop in the Westwood Mall. I was on the carousel. The handsome man had a bushy mustache and a gentleman's haircut. He looked like a 19th century bodybuilder. He did not remind me at all of my father. I spun centrifugal on a white mare. On my third time around, I saw the handsome man walking toward my little brother. On my fourth, I saw him crouched beside him with his hands on his knees. My little brother held a balloon in one hand and a cumulus cloud of fairy floss in the other. He was laughing. The handsome man was clip-clopping his hooves to the rhythm of the carousel music. I think it was a Calliope rendition of Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. When I came around once more, my little brother was gone. So was the handsome man. My mother was flirting with her hairdresser in the salon across the food court. My little brother was assimilated into the animatronic band at Major Magic's, a half-assed flyover state approximation of one of those children's fun centers with the pizza and the skee ball and the guy behind the counter who looks like he still lives in his parents' basement, but also has a pretty sick collection of blacklight posters. And if you make small talk with him about stoner metal, he might be inclined to hook you up with the bubble machine that normally costs 4,500 tickets. The place was owned by a guy named Harold Mudd. He had those big plastic Medicaid glasses and a bad cocaine habit. He owed a lot of money to some union boss who also had a stake in this practical effects company 2 towns over. Cherubic little bastard that he was, my younger brother got himself cast alive in molten wax and 3D modeled into an anthropomorphic barnyard dog, smoking a cigarette and slapping the bass guitar for Major Magic's Good Time Animal Family Band. The health department shut the place down like 9 years back when a whistleblower in the kitchen tipped them off about rat meat in the pepperoni. Business never recovered, but my little brother is still on stage, floppy ears dangling, poised to hit a drop D solo. Thanks, guys.
That was really good, Liam. Thank you. Next, we have Amre Klimchak, former classmate of mine. Look forward to hearing her work. Amre is a native of Florida and now lives in Ridgewood, Queens. She teaches and advises at LaGuardia Community College. Her essay, Auditioning for the Role of Boyfriend, recently appeared in the New York Times Modern Love column. She is finishing a memoir about driving cross-country with her dog, healing in the aftermath of her father's death. Amre, stage is yours.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks so much. So I'm going to read from a fragmented essay called Bodies of Water. So I'll read several of the fragments. The sun is high in the azure sky. The salty smell of ocean spray fills my nose. Seagulls glide above my head, riding on the breeze. They call out to each other, signaling some secret of existence. I enter, the salty liquid enveloping first my feet, then my calves and thighs. When I am waist deep, I wait for a gently sloping overhead wave. I dive just before it crests. The ocean is as warm as a bath, almost exactly the same temperature as the air. I am hardly aware where I end and it begins. My submerged body recognizes a salinity that matches its internal state. I rise up to the surface and lay back, spreading my arms, shining my face toward the sun. I pull up my legs and stretch out, supine on a raft of glistening blue. I am home. I grew up in Indian Harbor Beach, a small town on the Space Coast about 30 miles south of the Kennedy Space Center. My childhood summer days were watery, spent either at the community pool, a heavily chlorinated Olympic-sized oasis where I learned to swim, or at the beach. As a child, I could never understand why kids in other places stood slack-jawed after they asked where I was from, and I told them Florida. I might as well have said heaven. They longed to visit Disney World and water parks, and of course the beach. But the Florida Peninsula and its legendary coastline were simply all I knew. To have unfettered access to the ocean and its sacred biome without fees or prohibitions was a gift I only fully appreciated years later. The cyclone sat deserted near the Wonder Wheel. and the empty amusements of Luna Park. The parachute jump towered in the distance as James, my future husband, and I walked down the Coney Island boardwalk, past a few old men dotting the benches. It was after midnight, with thousands of stars shining against the clear, dark sky above. We stepped onto the sand, drawn toward the Atlantic. Aside from the men who disappeared into the darkness behind us, we had the vast expanse of beach to ourselves. When we neared the waves, we spread a blanket. We savored a rare moment of peace at this fabled spot that was thick with families and teenagers and tourists in daylight. Under the clear night sky, we couldn't resist each other. I became a teenager, kissing James by the light of the moon. Your body is like the ocean, one of my prenatal yoga instructors says. All of us mothers have increased our blood supply by 50% to support our developing babies, our miraculous bodies creating their own life-giving aqueous environments. A few months before her birth, James and I talk about what to name her. The ocean was my all-encompassing mother, and now I have become her. She could be my daughter too.
Great, Amre. Amre, thank you. Okay. Our last reader this evening is Kasey Jueds. Kasey's going to read some poetry. Now, Kasey is an author of 2 collections of poetry, The Thicket, published fall 2021, Keeper, which won the Agnes Lynch Starrett Prize, both from University of Pittsburgh Press. Her work can be found in journals including American Poetry Review, Crazy Horse, Narrative, Beloit Poetry Journal, Ninth Letter, Cincinnati Review, Bennington Review, and Pleiades. She lives in the mountains of New York State. Kasey, how about it?
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to read with all of you. It's been so beautiful and so moving to me. And I'm really honored to be in this issue of the journal. Thank you, Luann. Thank you, Michelle, especially. I'm going to read the 2 poems that are in this issue. One's quite short and the other one is a little bit longer. Away in February. No snow on the ground when I left, and none now, though in between 5 inches fell. Tell me how to live here. Tell me something true. In the child's drawing, snow appears as blankness. Anywhere, color is not. Tell me about winter. How the stick figures with their simple limbs stand in the midst of nothing and call it home. And this is called Litany Somehow. Under the windowsill, a few strands of old spider web move and move. And though I can't feel the air moving, it must be. And though I can barely see the snow, it's falling now, gauze and slant. And for once, I don't want to say it's like anything else. Just snow, singular and pure, and the woods too, the winter-stripped trees revealing their simplest selves. I've read they talk to one another somehow through nets of roots blooming where we can't see. Somehow trees, lichen, stone. Somehow my hand, this pen, and blood again this month, though sometime soon it will cease. Bleached winter grasses at the field's edge before birches and oaks rise up. And how I love the borders best, weeds by the side of the road, silvered and sharpened in headlights. Somehow Lucinda Williams's song, Side of the Road, and how its words understood the way I would love you even before we met. The things we know before we know them. Somehow snow still, even now, making its essential silence, which is a kind of sound. And somehow my young mother driving home decades ago and hearing for the first time the sound of silence on the radio before it was famous, before I was born, listening and then turning into the driveway and turning off the engine, opening the door of the car and the door of the house and finding my father waiting there and saying to him, I just heard the most beautiful song.
Thank you, Kasey. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to connect with your art and creative energy. Thank you for everyone who joined us this evening to listen and share this great art. The Southampton Review Winter Spring 2022 issue will be available to order. Go check it out. If it's not already, I think it's going to be up soon. A special thanks to the readers and editors who made this journal happen. A special thanks to Luann Walker, who pulls the strings behind the scenes. And for this event, thank you to Frank Imperiale, who invented the internet and keeps it running for everybody. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. I appreciate you all. Thank you for your art. Thank you for your energy. Be well, be safe.